Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove here today with another Omnibus review. Now last time round on the channel I took a look at the new X-Men Omnibus by Grant Morrison, and this time round I'm going to look at the follow-up book to that. So we're going to be taking a look at the Astonishing X-Men by Joss Whedon and John Cassaday Omnibus. So I'm going to be diving into the book today, showcasing it a little bit, talking about it, sharing some of my thoughts, maybe help you decide whether or not it's a book that you'd be interested in picking up at some point if you haven't already done so and had a read through it. So without any further ado, let's take a look at the book now and see what it's all about. Okay, so if we take a closer look at the book here then, so what I'll just point out first of all is that what I have here is the second printing of the omnibus. The first printing didn't feature any artwork on the hardcover in the way that this one does. So if you ever see a copy of the book that's got a more plain hardcover design, it'll be the first printing. And I think there's also been a third printing actually since I bought this one, which I want to say was back in 2020. I think there's been a more recent printing than that in the last few months. So I would imagine you might still be able to get copies of this. If it is getting hard to find though, I'm sure that this book will get another printing sooner or later because it's a popular, well-regarded run. So yeah, I feel certain at some point there'll be another printing again anyway. But if we take a closer look now and really start to dive in, looking at the dust cover, this was the standard variant cover when I picked it up, and it's a pretty simple design, but quite effective. I like the way that you've got the cast of characters here, the main roster of the team that features in this run, just kind of stood along the top of the title. So we see the Beast, Emma Frost, Colossus is there, Cyclops, Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. The writer throughout here being Joss Whedon and the artist John Cassaday. They collaborate on every issue in here, which gives it a good sense of kind of visual consistency as the art style stays the same throughout the whole book, which is something that I feel that New X-Men lacked a little bit with multiple different artists working on there, and the style of artwork therefore changing as you read through that book. That is not the issue, not the case here. So we're taking a look around the rest of it. So we've got the cover gallery on the back and the contents down at the bottom. So it's Whedon and Cassaday's full run. So it's issues 1 to 24 of Astonishing and giant size Astonishing X-Men #1, which is a kind of special that serves as a finale to the story in here. It comes at the end of the book. Looking at this wraparound image on the hardcover then, just to take a look around that and show that off in a bit more detail. It's basically a big battle scene. Very dramatic looking stuff. And yeah, that comes from the end of the book pretty much now. So I'm going to give a spoiler warning here, just before I really start to get into the book properly and look through it, because as I go through here, I'm going to talk about a few plot points. I won't talk about everything. You know, there's quite a lot to talk about in this book, as there is in any omnibus, so I won't attempt to get through absolutely every plot point, but I'll go through some key things, and I might show something off that you don't want to see if you've never read Astonishing X-Men before. So fair warning about that. But just as we see here, we've got a contents page. As I mentioned, the writer, Joss Whedon, artist, John Cassaday. But I also just wanted to mention the colour artist, Laura Martin, because I think that there's some really great use of colouring in here that really makes some of the pages and the panels pop. I think it's really well done overall. And then there's also this X-Men 101, this kind of brief history of X-Men from the very beginning in the Silver Age with the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby era, leading right up to the point at where this book starts. So whether or not you're an X-Men expert, just an expert there, or an absolute novice to the X-Men in the series, I think it's quite interesting to read through this and just get this little recap, you know, along with some handy little images from the relevant comics that just brings you back up to speed with it if you've not read it for a while or not read it at all. I think this is quite interesting to see. And it goes right up to and including the new X-Men run, which you know, immediately precedes this. But even if you've not read New X-Men, I will say if you've not read anything, to be honest, I think that you could probably still jump in and enjoy this book to some extent. It obviously helps to have some background knowledge of X-Men, but I think what makes this book popular, or certainly well recommended by a lot of people, is just how accessible it is. Because I feel like Joss Whedon just really made a conscious effort to give this book a kind of a fresh start feeling. So it doesn't get bogged down really in anything that came before it, even with the new X-Men, which came immediately before it. Because this book pretty much starts off in the first issue with the team having a conversation and saying that the way that they were doing things in the new X-Men era was not working. So they need a change of approach. And that's then what really happens. You know, they go off in a new direction. It was a real kind of changing course for the series when this book started. First thing I like, though, I've got to mention Kitty Pryde, who we see in these early scenes coming back to the mansion. She gets brought back into the team, has these cool little flashbacks to previous scenes in X-Men history. And I think that Kitty really shines as a character throughout this book. I think she's really well utilised as a character consistently throughout here. She steals the show in a lot of issues for me. But really all the characters I think are well handled, to be honest, in this book. And there's a lot of, I would say, light-hearted comedic moments as well. I think that one key difference between New X-Men and this book is that this book just doesn't take itself quite so seriously. It's more willing to have a bit of a laugh here and there. Which is not to say that there isn't a serious story running through it. It's just that Whedon, I think, is more willing than Morrison was to break the serious moments up now and then, break up the tension a little bit with moments of levity, little bits of humour just injected here and there in the dialogue, and some fun little visual gags as well with Cassaday's artwork. I think that Whedon and Cassaday really bounced off each other really well creatively when going through this run. And the first real story arc then that we see after Kitty comes in and joins the team is that we get the announcement from this lady here, this scientist, that there's a cure been invented for mutants that will cure them of their mutations. Just want to show this page off. I mean, there's a bit of gutter loss here, but you know, it's not too bad. But it's a great double page spread where the X-Men are back in costume again after having been in the black leather during the New X-Men era. In here, Scott Summers, you know, Cyclops pretty much just says to the team, we've got to get back in costume, we need to focus on being superheroes again because the whole leather look is not working. Kind of funny, slightly, maybe slightly disrespectful to Morrison, but yeah, I mean, I prefer it personally. I like the X-Men back in the costumes. I just think it works better. But yeah, I mean, let me know if you like the new X-Men costumes or if you preferred it when they got back into these superhero costumes. Happy to hear the opinions of others. But yeah, just to kind of get back on course with the story then. So there's this mutant cure, supposed mutant cure, so that naturally draws the attention of the X-Men. They go and investigate, and, you know, I won't go through everything that happens with the plot, but basically there's more to it than there seems. Things are a bit more sinister than they initially appear to be. And yeah, things start to escalate from there, really. What I like throughout this book is there's some cool character interactions. So we've got Emma Frost is, you know, still on the team from New X-Men, and she and Cyclops are in a relationship at this point. The other members of the team, in particular Wolverine, are not particularly happy about that relationship because, you know, the way that things ended off in New X-Men, it doesn't necessarily seem too appropriate to them. But as I say already, I think the main character that I really enjoy reading throughout here is Kitty. And her interactions with Emma are also really interesting because if you throw it back right to their first appearance as an X-Men, back during the Chris Claremont and John Byrne era of Uncanny X-Men, when those characters first met, Emma Frost was very much a villain. And yeah, things didn't exactly get off to a good start between them. She didn't exactly make a good impression on Kitty. So now that Emma Frost is supposedly, you know, reformed and on the side of the good, Kitty Pryde doesn't necessarily trust her, I think it's safe to say. But this is a really powerful scene. So this is something I have to talk about. This is where Colossus comes back. Colossus had died off in the comics years earlier. He died during the whole Legacy virus saga, which came a few years before this. And he was believed dead, but during these scenes, of all characters, it's Kitty who completely by chance, coincidentally, just discovers him alive in this facility. And this is a really great example of fantastic use of visual storytelling with Cassaday's artwork. I love the expressions and the slight changes in between panels here. No dialogue needed. It works perfectly well, just being showcased in this way. The kind of emotional impact of Kitty discovering this man that she loved, who she believed to be dead, alive here. The shock of it is really emotional. Great emotional scene there. Really love that. And as you get Colossus back in the team, the relationship between those two starts to redevelop again. It's really quite sweet. The whole relationship dynamic between Kitty and Peter, Colossus, is really nice. But what to keep things moving a little bit, so that's a pretty cool cover, I like that. Yeah, so out of this storyline with the mutant cure, you move on to the next major storyline, which centres around the Danger Room. Although actually there's this scene here with a giant monster in New York first, which is pretty cool. think this is where the Fantastic Four get involved. Yeah, so the X-Men have a bit of a meeting with the Fantastic Four. But yeah, so moving on to the next major story anyway, to try and keep things going a little bit, is a story that focuses on the Danger Room. Because, as it turns out, the Danger Room is alive. It's not necessarily alive, but it's got a kind of artificial intelligence. It's got a consciousness of its own. And it turns on the team, it turns on the school, and it becomes embodied in this new villain here, this kind of cyborg thing, this robot, that just calls itself Danger. And the backstory to that basically explains that at some point in the past, Professor X had knowingly kind of imprisoned this AI in the Danger Room and forced it to just run combat simulations for the X-Men. And that's, you know, as you've seen in many scenes throughout X-Men history up to this point, where the X-Men do the training in the Danger Room, the interesting take on it here is that after all that, it means that this new villain basically knows all of the X-Men's strengths and weaknesses, because it's got years and years of combat data relating to each of them. And at around this time as well, we start to see things shift with Emma Frost a little bit, and it starts to really come into question as to where her true loyalties lie, whether or not she can be trusted or not. It's kind of kept ambiguous. You know, she seems to be turning on the X-Men a little bit, but at the same time, you can kind of tell that maybe her heart isn't in that. It's very interesting. You know, she's very, very interestingly written, I think, throughout here, Emma. I honestly think that her addition to the team was probably my favourite aspect of New X-Men overall. I think that bringing her into it and the fact that she remained involved in the X-Men beyond that point is, in my opinion, possibly the best long-lasting part of New X-Men's legacy, really. Yeah, but certainly interesting to see what goes on with her in here, because there's some interesting scenes between her and Scott where she seems to be manipulating him and messing with his head with these, you know, taking the form of the Phoenix, of Jean Grey. And yeah, you start to get the story building up to bigger and bigger scale. Like you move from, you know, kind of more standard fights into space battles. By the time you get to the end of this run, things really start to escalate quite considerably. But there's a scene here that I'm just going to want to pinpoint in a minute and just really showcase off a really good homage by John Cassaday. Because in this story, there's basically a new Hellfire Club that comes together and forms. And you get this really nice homage coming at the end of issue 15. So this is where Kitty Pryde has fallen down, and in exactly the same way that we saw at the end of the classic Uncanny X-Men 132, where Wolverine famously fell into the sewers beneath the Hellfire Club and emerged with that Wolverine strikes, you know, it's my turn panel. This is a really nice homage to that. So, homaging the original Hellfire story with this new one. This time it's Kitty, of course, in that pose. Really nice though, I love a good homage like that. I had to draw attention to it because I think it's really cool. But yeah, so it's really weird scenes here. So all the X-Men basically get their minds messed with. So Wolverine takes on the mentality of a child. The Beast is turned into basically a savage beast, loses all of his intelligence, just goes off on a rampage. And Kitty comes back. She's kind of attacked, but she recovers, makes her way back after that awesome homage ending, and kicks the crap out of Emma Frost. Yeah, I think, you know, I've already said, but I think that Kitty is the best character in here. I think she's just really well written. Honestly, really cool character work with her. And she gets a big moment at the end as well, which, you know, obviously I'll showcase a bit more when I get there. It's a really nice cover as well, with all the different versions of Emma Frost from over the years, different variations of her costume, if you can really call it a costume. Yes, this Danger character, you know, she lingers around for quite a while. This basically just a robot with an AI intelligence inside it. Really nice artwork though. Again, you know, just got to draw attention to that, and I just think it's really well done. There's some really nice expressions that Cassaday does, and these kind of panels like this, you know, where you get a bit of a close-up on somebody's face. I think he's very good at expressions, which helps enormously when you're trying to do like character development and things like that. It's great if you've got an artist who can draw clear expressions like that. Nice double page spread here. So yeah, it all ends up in this big space battle, you know, by the end of the book, you know, with the team going off in a spaceship to an alien world. And yeah, it starts to get pretty crazy and intense. By the end of the book, you get other characters from other teams getting involved. And you get members of the Avengers come into it. You know, Doctor Strange, for example, I think he gets into it as well. Not necessarily massively involved, but basically the stakes end up threatening the whole Earth as of the end of the outcome of what happens in this battle. Really good. I think this is a very cinematic story. You know, overall, I think that's a good way to describe it. As I say, it's got its fun moments. It's got its little comedic moments here and there, so things never get too heavy and serious. I think it's a more simple and fun story, and frankly, I prefer Astonishing X-Men to New X-Men overall. I think this is more of a quick and enjoyable read, whereas I think, you know, with New X-Men, it tends to focus maybe a little bit too much on being conceptual rather than just telling an entertaining story. But I think what you can't really fault this for is being just a bit of a roller coaster ride of fun. Really nice John Cassaday Spidey image here, double page spread. This is the final issue in the book, by the way, that giant size issue, which, as I say, serves as the big finale for this whole thing. But what you end up having happened is the aliens that the X-Men have been fighting against in that final battle on the alien world, they fire a giant bullet towards the Earth, which is kind of ridiculous in how over the top it is, but it's it's what gets everybody else involved, basically, because obviously this threatens the entire planet if they can't find a way to stop it. Now, on this bullet is Kitty Pryde, alone and by herself. And she gets her huge heroic moment, basically, as a result of this. I want to give a quick spoiler warning again. I did give one at the beginning, but before I just mention what happens at the very end here, just want to stop and just say, you know, final spoiler warning for the ending, because there's a big moment for Kitty Pryde where she does something pretty amazing. And you see it here happening, she uses her powers to phase this enormously ridiculous bullet through the Earth so that it causes no damage to anything. It phases through the entire planet. I love how this is drawn by Cassaday. I love the shock that we see on everybody else's face as they can't believe what's happening, really. But it therefore ends on a bit of a sour note for me, a bit of a downbeat ending in a way. I mean, the Earth is saved. Obviously, that's fantastic news for everybody. But in doing that, Kitty had to kind of sacrifice herself to keep this bullet intangible so that it would go through the planet. And she's just kind of flying through space. She's still on, well, she's in this bullet, I think, at this point. And she just kind of flies off. And everybody's kind of saying there's no way to get her back. So it's kind of sad. And then it just ends on that note. That was the DM variant cover for the Omnibus, by the way. So just take a look through some of these extras. So even though I find this book to be a lot of fun, and obviously you can read beyond this and find out what ultimately becomes of Kitty Pryde later down the line in the story. But in terms of an ending point for this book, I don't know, it's just a little bit sad. You know, I remember reading that and thinking, wow, you're going to end it like that for real? What happens to Kitty? You know, I was kind of fully invested because, like I say, I think she's the standout character through this run. So the fact that it's her who gets lost in space, seemingly unable to be helped in any way because of that, I don't know, it left me with mixed feelings. But I would love to hear your thoughts on the ending of this book and whether or not you thought it was good or bad. Seeing some really cool variants here, though, by the way, focusing on each of the characters. Yeah, so Astonishing X-Men. It's a lot of fun, definitely a good read. I think I would rank it a bit above New X-Men in my own opinion, but as I say, it's a different type of story really to New X-Men, and it's just going to come down to personal preference as to which of those two you prefer if you've read them both, I'm sure. because they are distinctively different in my opinion. But yeah, I would absolutely love to hear the thoughts of anybody as to what you think about Astonishing X-Men, whether or not you've got this omnibus or you've read it in trades or anything else, you know, digitally or whatever it may be. But there we go. So that's Astonishing X-Men then. And a book that I definitely recommend checking out if you're an X-Men fan overall. I've got to say it's well worth reading. But thanks as always for watching. If you've stuck with me all the way through here, I appreciate that as always. I'll be back again soon to discuss something else.